So, go ahead and tell us your name, what you do, your credentials, and how long have you been doing it?
Okay, so my name is Shawn Shelton. I'm the co-owner of a makeup company called Bandersnatch Studios. We're based in the Seattle area. The company has been around for about 3.5 years, and we're a full-service makeup company, but we specialize in special effects makeup and character makeups involving prosthetics. We also do custom props and fabrication of basically anything. If somebody needs somebody to be turned into a zombie, we can do that. Head to toe, we can do special effects gags where somebody getting decapitated or a hand getting cut off, or on the custom prop side, we can do replicate a bat. If an actor needs to hit another actor with a bat and not get hurt, we can take an original bat and make a foam soft version that looks just like the original. So we basically make things that don't exist or make fake versions of things that do exist. So a lot of it's about illusion and selling, an effect or a gag that isn't real, turning a young person into an old person, that sort of thing. So that's our whole world. As far as me personally, I've been doing some version of this kind of work since I was a kid. I started in theater at about age 10 and was into monster movies as a child. Basically, as a child who was into special effects and I was also an actor, I got into the world of special effects makeup. I read the 6 books that were out at the time. It's a lot better now, but and just experimented with things and taught myself how to do this, and basically cut to 30 years later, and I've been working in the industry professionally doing this sort of thing for about 10 years.
Okay, cool.
That's the story.
All right, so me and you, we've already looked at the pictures, and I've already sent them to you. So, do you think that on the face of the supposed Bigfoot, is that paint wash around the eyes? And has it washed into the cracks of whatever it is?
As far as the coloring, let me look here. Okay, so there's a few things I see with the color scheme in general, is that it definitely looks painted to begin with, and what I see are maybe like 2 or 3 colors going on, which sort of the giveaway thing for me is when you look at any real flesh, there's a ton of layers of color going on. It's very rare that you see something that is truly one color. And for instance, if I put on a prosthetic on an actor, that it's say something that's silver dollar sized, and I put it on an actor's face, and I need to blend it with their face. It begins maybe at a neutral flesh tone or maybe a pinkish flesh tone as a base color, and then I would add so many different colors to make it match their face. Because the human skin has got red tones, it's got yellows and blues and pinks and all these different things that are going on. So there's all these different colors that are going on, and what I see here is a base structure and then one pass of a certain color and then a second pass of another color and then maybe a third pass, but it could just be dust or something. It's hard to tell from the photo.
Yeah.
But the I think the biggest thing for me, beyond the paint, especially when I'm looking at the face, is the hair.
Yes.
And the sort of the problem there is that the hair looks very much, it sits on top of the understructure. And in my world, when we have to simulate hair on somebody, there is a process, like if you put a beard on somebody, there's a process that we call hand laying a beard. And in that process, take typically crepe hair, which is a crepe wool, because it naturally looks more like beard hair than like regular human head hair.
Yeah.
And you lay layer by layer, and you glue on a little bit, but it is always sitting on top of the skin. If we have prosthetics, or like say like a head, so we're the hair is essentially laying on the subject. When we have silicone, or like gelatin or other materials that we use that simulate flesh. So, as an example, if I had a body or like a decapitated head or something like that, and I needed to put hair on it, you can start with a wig, but at least at the edges of it, to sell the effect of the hair growing out of it, we actually punch the hair into the material. So we use a fancy needle that pushes the hairs into the quote unquote flesh or the skin, and so you can actually see the hairs coming out. Like if you look at a dog or a cat and you see the whiskers actually coming out of them in that three-dimensional way. I don't see that at all. It looks very much like clumps of hair glued onto an object.
So what do you think the hair is? Like, what kind? Is it hair? Is it fur?
I think it's crepe wool. I think it's crepe hair. Something that you would get at a costume shop where they sell makeup stuff for people to make fake beards with.
Could they even sell this at Michael's, perhaps?
I wouldn't expect it at Michael's.
Okay.
It's more like something like a costume shop, makeup store kind of thing where they sell stage makeup.
Okay.
It's something you can either get it if there's a place locally, you can order it online. It is like one of the oldest tools in the theatrical makeup, arsenal of stuff. There's been a lot of technology that has changed over the years, and things are very different than they used to be. But this is something that has been around forever. And I would say, as far as how this looks, it looks like, and it's kind of hard to tell from some of these pictures because it's covered in hair. So it's really hard to pin down what the understructure is. But the face looks so like it could be plaster of Paris. It could be paper material. I mean, it really could be anything basic like that. It could be clay that's been painted on top of. I mean, it really could be almost anything that can be sculpted. And as a sculptor, I would throw in my critique that it's not done very well. It doesn't have. It has a really large or like gross level of detail, not gross in icky gross. It gross is in large. It's very the sculpting that has taken place there looks very large and simple, as opposed to having any fine lines or details or cracks or wrinkling of the skin. It looks very not cartoony on one hand. On the other hand, it looks very simple, like somebody that wasn't very experienced would do.
Okay. So do you notice the presence of glue in the hair around the face?
I don't really see glue per se, although I can see sections like on the brow where it looks like where I can see how the effect of the gluing is taking place. So the hair starts at just above the eyes where the eyebrow part starts, and then it clings very closely to the brow and then comes back up onto the head and then curves off. And so that suggests to me that there is some adhesive along that brow there. The hair was stuck to it, and then once the adhesive sort of trails off, then the hair sort of, curves away from the glue area. The other thing I see is how the hair under the eyes and under the nose, the sort of extended mustache thing that's going on there, it looks like a clump of hair right under the eyes that is just clustered there and curves off, and it doesn't begin like a beard does, where it starts and then gradually it becomes fuller as it extends outward. It just sort of looks like a rolled up clump of hair glued along that line. So there's no natural transition.
Yeah, the hair's laying unnaturally.
Oh yeah, and it looks like it's growing up. Of course, this is something that supposedly has been taxidermied, and really, I would say the other part of this scenario is that no, I don't think taxidermists would be proud of this kind of work if this is actually something that has been taxidermied. Because I think even like this sort of the stitching thing that's going down the chest looks like something that you wouldn't ever want to leave in the finished product.
It's the autopsy scar, and that was my next question. What do you think about that?
I think it looks like a quote-unquote, like, sort of overly obvious autopsy scar. Because it doesn't look like something that has been legitimately examined and then closed up. Because if it was either examined in a medical environment, it would have been closed up in a way that it wouldn't still sort of be resting open. There'd be stitches, possibly visible stitches, or they could be more discreet, but it would be more closed up than it looks in this state. And beyond that, from a taxidermy standpoint, I would assume that would be closed up and hidden through the taxidermy process, as opposed to being something that's sort of presented that looks very obvious. If I had to venture a guess, I would say my gut feeling is that it was put there on purpose and presented as further proof of, that it had an autopsy.
Yeah.
So it seems very suspect.
Okay, great. That's what I was thinking too, and a bunch of other people. But
right.
I sent you a picture, I think a close-up of the foot. On the second toe, does that look like some sort of bubble that has possibly popped from a material?
Right. So that, to me, there's a lot of things wrong with this. I wish the image was a little clearer, but it looks like possibly it could be a plaster bubble or something like that then was shaved off, and so leaving the exposed bubble. And the other thing that I see is how the toenails don't, they literally look like actual toenails to me. Like in a organic sense from what I would expect to find in nature. Not that that means anything with a creature that we haven't examined or have a history of in a biological sense, but it they look like part of the same thing, whereas our nails sort of have this weird thing where they sort of come out of us, but they are very different than the surrounding area. Yeah. They look so rough and so opaque that they strike me as odd and not what I would expect from a humanoid creature that lives on this planet. It seems like they would be much more like human fingernails, which translates into other simians and monkeys that are very similar. That the thing very very much like humans when it comes to how they look. Even if they're a different color scheme, they still have that odd translucency to them, revealing the color underneath. Yeah. So that whole picture is probably just as bad as anything else in the other photos that makes me really dubious.
Okay, great. No, that's good. So, this is a question from someone. What kind of specialist is needed to make the body, and where could you have a body like that made?
Wow. So, I have to laugh a little bit at the phraseology asking about a specialist, because in this case, they should have gone to a better specialist.
Well, it said that they've paid, and this is just hearsay, but he has paid $6,000 to get it done. Would you say that's a fair price?
$6,000 to have a fake thing made?
Yeah, that thing. It said.
Right. I would say that was money not well spent. And here's really the thing. I mean, so our company, we did a commercial for a shoe company where we basically had to costume a Sasquatch, and so we had and they didn't give us a lot of time, and so what we did is we actually purchased the high-end Chewbacca costume, which I think was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $500. And we basically took that, cut the face out of the mask, reshaped the head so it had an elongated sort of Harry and the Hendersons head shape, yeah, and then used prosthetics on the actor's face for the rest of it, which was, I'm trying to remember now if it was sold as an ape prosthetic or a caveman prosthetic. It was one or the other. I think it was an ape simian sort of prosthetic that we used. And so, in terms of our hard costs for that particular project, I mean, we probably spent under $1,000. There was a lot of labor that was put into the finished product because we modified things and changed things, and we had to fit it to the actor and that sort of thing. But in terms of making a static body, there's a lot of things that you can cheat because you're not fitting X thing to fly thing. So you could start out with foam, which is really cheap. You could go to your local hardware store and basically carve the body and get the bulk of the object essentially, and then most of it's gonna get covered with hair anyway, and then beyond that, then you can specifically focus on the exposed skin areas, theoretically like the feet, the hands, the face. Now, in our world, we probably would want to, like, for instance, if we had carved the shape in foam of some kind, there's lots of options there. But then we would probably just, if we were trying to do a convincing reproduction of something that, we can only assume might exist, but we would probably skin it in something, whether it's latex, which we don't use a lot these days, but you could skin it in latex, rubber. The problem with latex is it's very opaque, and so it doesn't give that illusion of translucency like most skin has in some degree. So we would probably skin it in a silicone rubber, and even if it was thin, but it would give us that sense of skin underneath everything. And then we would, from there, we would get into the process of covering it in hair, which would either involve actually physically hand punching every hair on the body, which would give you the most convincing illusion, or you would work in sections that are like what we call wefts, W-E-F-T. And so we're like sections of a wig where you have a whole row of hair that's already stitched together, and you could lay those down in sections and sections and sections, and then you would punch hair maybe just in the tricky spots where you can kind of see the edges, like around the face, around the hands, that sort of thing. It would just really to, time and money that were available. As far as the face and the hands and those finer details of skin that you would see, that would be something where you would actually ideally sculpt something in clay, then you would make a mold, and then you would cast it again in your finished medium, which would be like either a urethane rubber or a silicone rubber. Then you'd pull it out, you'd paint it, attach it to the larger object, and then you'd finish it off with the hair around it to kind of. But I would say money would be happy to take $6,000 and make a Sasquatch body, and I don't want to sound braggadocious or anything, but I'm sure we could produce something that was, 10 times more convincing as what I'm seeing in these photos.
So could you recreate this?
If I had to.
Okay.
I'd rather do something better. But if I had to make a replica of this, I could. Like I said, I'd rather put my efforts at doing something that was more convincing. But yeah.
Okay. And so I showed.
I think I could take a class of high school art students and they be replicated.
Oh boy, that's awesome.
Perhaps middle schoolers.
All right. So I showed you the video of the tent video, and
Right.
We've already discussed that a little bit. And your opinion is most likely what?
Well, while I don't have the credentials to break apart the digital image and detect any signs of something that you would do in post-production with like an After Effects, Photoshop kind of thing, I don't, from working in the film industry and experience, our world with physical, practical effects crosses over so much with the post-production CG type effects. I don't see any of the telltale signs of CG there. There's a little bit of an interaction with the face and the tree that I could see might need some answers to, but it's so hard because the video is so grainy. It could be an interplay of light between the light that's behind the tree and where the face crosses that plane. But other than that, I don't see anything that screams CG.
Okay.
What it looks to me is like a much better costume, because it does look three-dimensional. It does look like a humanoid, ape-ish figure, turning its head. I do see that sense of dimension, and it's definitely more convincing than the still photos that are being displayed. It looks more ape-like, for starters, and less, I guess, caveman is probably the word I'd have to use for the object that's being displayed in the case.
Okay.
With the larger, exaggerated nose and the lips, this thing looks more ape-like, which means that if I had to venture a guess, I would say maybe it's some sort of gorilla costume, or maybe just a really good, Bigfoot type costume. Although I will say that when we did this commercial, we had a really hard time finding good, convincing Sasquatch costumes on the market that you would be able to fool somebody with. They were very exaggerated or cartoony or just cheap. But we do, for instance, know another guy that lives up here in Washington, who, oh gosh, what is his name? Doug, I think is his name. His company's Clone Effects, with a K, K-L-O-N-E. And he rents a Bigfoot costume that is quite good. I don't know if it can show expression, but most of the sort of archetypal video and stuff that we see is usually just body movement. You're not really seeing any face movement, and it's quite good. And then I know there's an actor, that I've worked with who does a lot of work inside creature suits, and he did a series of commercials for, was it Hyundai, I think? Okay. And I'd have to look up who did the effects on that. But they built a really great, thing on him that was really convincing. But he could actually talk. They did a whole series of YouTube videos that are quite funny. And he had a whole personality and everything. It was really, really quite entertaining. But they had the suit, but again, they were working, like I was saying, where they had prosthetics on the face, and then it was kind of surrounded with the hair and that sort of thing. But yeah, the costume, it feels like that's the direction it went, as opposed to like a dummy or a cardboard cutout or something like that. It does look to me like a three-dimensional object.
So how hard would it be to make a Bigfoot face that would have movable parts, like mouth, nostrils flaring?
Well, in terms of, it's really not how hard it is to do. It's how much time and how much money.
Yeah.
Because essentially, if you had what we're getting into with that is what we would call an animatronic head. So it's the same thing like if you go to a museum and they have an animatronic dinosaur.
Okay.
And there's There's going to be mechanisms and hydraulics and servos and all these different things and cables and whatnot that actually, pull on certain parts. It has to be made a certain way. And so essentially for what we would, in the business, we would call like a creature head or a monster head, you would have to make something and allow for the machinery underneath.
Okay.
So what you end up with is you have to build something either, if it's going to go on a person, you have to build an understructure, you have to create essentially like a skull underneath that can house this machinery underneath, and then it can get a skin over the top of it. Or the other option would be having something that is essentially a robot that you create that has these functions, and you could control that independently, and it can kind of be whatever size and scale that you want it to be. So if you wanted a walking, expressing, or whatever, Bigfoot costume sort of thing, so if you wanted to put it on an actor, and then the head would have to more or less be on top of their actual head, unless you made it so big that the head is above their shoulders.
Okay.
And then we would be in a different realm. But the two most common things that you would see for an expressive face are going to be like a static kind of, like I said, like a robot kind of thing that is just a machine with a skin on it, or you have to make it to fit over a person's head. And the problem that you run into with that is that you have to exaggerate out the scale so that you can accommodate a human head inside. So what you likely could end up with is a head that doesn't fit the proportion of the body.
Okay.
So what you would do is, like, for instance, if I had a creature, and I get a head cast of the actor that it's going to go on, and I would pile on pounds of clay and make the sculpt of whatever it is that I was going to make, but I have to do that with keeping in mind that there's going to be machinery put underneath. So I have to allow like 2 inches here or a 1/4 inch here or that sort of thing, because there's servos and cables that are connected to the lips and the eyes and all these different parts. And I feel like that's why in the past so many of the presumably hoax videos and things like that are usually A, at a distance, or B, blurry, grainy, and also what you see is it's just the body movement and maybe a head turn, and you're not really seeing any expressive facial movements at all, because to make something that's sort of ape-like, which is our sort of standard, what we hear the face would look like, you don't have a lot of room to create that machinery. So if you take a really flat-featured ape sort of looking face, then you don't have a lot of room without making the head too big. So then you've got to make the head bigger, you've got to make the shoulders bigger, and so you start getting into a proportional mathematical problem where when your eyes look at it, you think, no, there's something going on there. It doesn't look right.
Okay. Well, good. That went into detail. Awesome.
All right.
We have 2 more questions, and they're pretty much fun questions. So
Okay.
he calls his Bigfoot in the box Hank. Now, someone wants to know, does Hank look like the troll goblin from the movie Troll?
Kinda.
Okay.
I mean, I think mostly because of like the color scheme, because it's kind of pinkish.
I've never seen the movie, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, that's funny. What you really need to see, like, there's the first Troll movie, but then what you have to see is Troll 2.
Okay. I will.
Troll 2 there's also, well, maybe even better, you might not even have to watch Troll 2. What you need to see is a documentary called The Best Worst Movie.
Okay.
And it's about the making of and the journey of this movie called Troll 2, which has nothing to do with the first Troll movie and doesn't even have trolls in it. They're actually goblins. It's pretty hilarious, so I recommend it.
Okay. And my last question, some of my good friends want to know, when will the real lightsaber come out?
Oh, when will the real lightsaber come out?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. It's one of those things that I've seen talked about on a really scientific level. And I think that it might not be possible because, so if I recall correctly, the scientific problem with a lightsaber is generating a quote-unquote energy blade with a finite end. So, like, making it only 30 inches long, because it's like the kind of thing like a laser, because it just keeps going. So, from what my understanding, it's hard to generate something that might have like that sort of energy, that heat, energy, but that can't just keep going. So I think we might be out of luck with lightsabers. It's sad to say because I would buy one instantly. But I think scientifically it might not be possible.
Oh, they will be bummed. That's for sure.
Hey, I'll get mine. I'll I'll let them cut in front of me in line when they come out. I'll be happy to be wrong about that one.
Great. I'd love to have one too. I mean, you have been absolutely cool. Most of these people, like I said, no one would come forward.
I have to admit, there was a minute, like, wait, do I want to get in the middle of anything? I guess in some respects I maybe am taking a stand, but it's based on my experience, and I just can't buy the images that I'm looking at, particularly when it comes to this object that's in the case.
Well, I won't keep you any longer. I appreciate this so much. You have no idea.
You bet. If you have any other questions, feel free to email or call and keep me posted on what happens.
Oh, I will. And thank you so much.
You bet. Talk to you later. Take care.
Bye.
Interview done by Jennifer Kaywood, a Crypto Crew team member.